So how should India react? How do we navigate the shifting tides of power and security in an uncertain world? From grand strategy to military technology, from power and conflict to the unseen forces shaping our world, and from battlefields to the halls of power, we decode the past, analyze the present, and anticipate the future of global security. I'm Sandeep Unitan, and this is the National Security Agenda. China and the United States are locked in a global geopolitical contest. And the US Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, just told US Congress that China is our most capable strategic competitor. And under the leadership of President Xi Jinping, the People's Republic of China seeks to position itself on the world stage economically, technologically, and militarily. It's an admission of a contest between the US and China, but it's now shifted to a familiar battleground, an unexpected one at that, Afghanistan. Now, a US delegation was in Kabul recently, and just a few hours back, the Taliban spokesperson, Zabiullah Mujahid, announced that Afghanistan and China will be connected through the Wakhan corridor this year. He says Afghanistan will earn $6 billion annually from transit revenues. 1 year of transit revenues could significantly change Afghanistan's fortunes. Mujahid said, is Afghanistan the new battleground for a new US and China rivalry? And what are India's options? Joining me to discuss this are Ambassador Suresh Goyal and Brigadier Kuldeep Singh. Gentlemen, welcome to the National Security Agenda. Brigadier Kuldeep, everyone's focused on Taiwan and Iran, but no one's looking at the moves in Afghanistan. Zalmay Khalilzad was there a few days back, and now the Taliban have announced that they want to build a corridor to China through the Wakhan corridor. Explain to our viewers why the United States wants to return to Afghanistan 4 years after that very public and humiliating withdrawal that we saw.
Before I address that issue, which is also related to the ongoing so-called rapprochement between the USA and Russia, perhaps in order to marginalize China in the shades of what happened in 1972, like the rapprochement between the USA and China in order to marginalize the USSR. Let me just dwell upon the background of this entire corridor. Now, the Wakhan is the extension of Afghanistan's Tajik-dominated Badakhshan province, and is inhabited by Wakhis and Pamiris who practice moderate Islam. It has a tough terrain and a very sparse population of roughly about 15,000 people. There's a river valley which runs along the entire Wakhan. And this was probably an old trade route, which they say. Now, to the north, you're well aware, the Wakhan touches Afghanistan, Tajikistan. In the south, it runs along the northern areas, which are claimed by India, but are under the illegal occupation of Pakistan. And then to the southwest, it touches Pakistan's KPP province, or the erstwhile Northwest Frontier province. And the Wakhan has a small, tiny frontier on its eastern-facing side, which touches China's Xinjiang province. Now, during the Cold War, this strip had continued to separate USSR from Pakistan. And the Taliban, even during heydays, could not, conquer this area or capture this area. But post 9/11, the USA started to face problems in 2009 in sending supplies to Afghanistan through Pakistan. And the US then started exploring the possibility of using the Tajikistan Wakhan-Kabul route. Now, incidentally, a US aid-funded Wildlife Conservation Society had been working in Wakhan, and the people there perhaps would have welcomed NATO. But the Wakhan has some of the world's highest and most rugged mountains around it. The existing rough road that was there was beset by weather for over a year, and the bridges weren't built for heavy trucks. So General Petraeus, who was there, and the United States-led NATO force, they decided that given the time and the effort required, there was a need to build another route, which, as you're aware, was then called the Northern Distribution Network, which ran from Haratin side, that is northwest Afghanistan, into Uzbekistan, and then linked up with Eurorail and into Europe. Now, in 2010, the US National Geological Survey had concluded that Afghanistan has nearly US $1 trillion in untapped mineral deposit, especially iron ore, copper, and lithium, which highlighted the potential of Afghanistan's mining sector to be a major source of revenue. Now, just before that, China had invested about, US dollars 3.4 billion in INEC mine, which is 35 kilometers south of Kabul.
Right.
And this had envisioned, mining about 11 million tons of copper, an amount equal to 1/3 of all the known copper reserves in China. But the project couldn't take off on account of, security situation in Afghanistan and the paucity of transportation infrastructure.
Absolutely.
Yet
and now, things are coming back to normal, Brigadier Kuldeep, the fact that the Taliban are in control of Afghanistan for 4 years, and that possibly explains what we are seeing right now with China and the United States coming back into Afghanistan. I'm going to ask Ambassador Goyal, Ambassador Goyal, in January, Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri met the Taliban's acting foreign minister in Doha. The Taliban for the longest time were a pariah state, no country recognized it. But now, given the kind of geopolitical moves that are underway, you have the US envoy visiting, you have the Taliban admitting they have a corridor that they're planning to build to China. Is it only a matter of time before the Taliban are now recognized as the de facto rulers of Afghanistan?
I think as far as the de facto recognition is concerned, that is already there. Otherwise, if you recall that the American troops practically surrendered before Taliban as they came into Kabul, and they had to, in fact, even the airport security, they had to take the assurance from Taliban before they could actually exit Afghanistan. Therefore, there is no question about de facto recognition of the Taliban. It's de jure really that we need to think about. And as far as de jure recognition is concerned, you are quite right. It's only a matter of time.
It's only a matter of time before the Taliban are recognized as the rulers of Afghanistan. Officially recognized.
Yeah, absolutely. Now what we need to say is that today's geopolitics, Tulsi Gabbard said, competitor, I think she was fighting shy of saying that China is the main rival.
Right.
In geostrategic terms as far as the USA is concerned. If you look at the moves towards Ukraine, Russia, Europe, they all seem to be basically suggesting really the eventual aim towards China, how to keep China in restraint and therefore keep Europe, etc., but focus on China. Now, the point really here is, if China does build that corridor through Wakhan corridor to Afghanistan,
right?
Transit, I don't know, unless they develop the transit to Tajikistan.
Yes.
But for Tajikistan, they don't need to go through Wakhan. They can go straight from Xinjiang into Tajikistan and take the route, unless they are looking at Iran also.
Right.
Otherwise, the transit doesn't make any sense to me. But as a direct access into Afghanistan for the mineral resources and to basically another access to the Indian Ocean, it makes sense to me, really.
Right. Why Afghanistan and Iran and into the Indian Ocean?
Absolutely.
But Brigadier Singh, we're also hearing that the Americans are very keen that the Taliban return $7 billion worth of US military hardware that was left behind in Afghanistan. How much of a sore point do you believe this is going to be between the US and the Taliban? I mean, of course, President Trump has kept emphasizing this point that Joe Biden's administration ran away and they left all that $7 billion worth of hardware. The Taliban have refused to return that hardware. Give us a sense of whether this is going to become a sore point between the two countries.
See, it all depends on how you look at it. The fact remained that the decision was taken because, we just don't, we look at these issues from the point of how President Trump is enunciating them. If you look at what Afghanistan is, it's a landlocked country. The US had no way it could go through Iran because of the rivalry there. With the Russia shutting down many of the access points in Central Asia, they had become dependent on Pakistan. And in spite of that, there were problems with, Pakistan, after that strike over there and Pakistan trying to shut down the routes, which were shut down for some time and all that, and then reopened. and the northern distribution network had to be activated. But even transporting things to northern distribution network was not easy.
Right.
Much of all ammunition and all weaponry was being flown in.
Right.
So before departing from Afghanistan, at that time a decision was taken that rather than fly out everything, which perhaps would have been much more expensive than the cost of the equipment itself, they decided to destroy all the ammunition and disable much of the equipment which is there. So much of the equipment which is left there is not usable.
Right.
The Taliban has been able to cannibalize some of that equipment and use some of that. But for example, if you look at recently, there was a report about them flying a Mi-8 or a Mi-17 after reassembling it. But what could they do really with it? They were not able to, re-equip it with missiles or something like that.
Right. So it's largely going to be a symbolic move. If the Taliban kind of returns some of that equipment, President Trump is going to use it as a victory against the Biden administration.
That is more of a political point that President Trump has been drumming in, that they left all the equipment behind. It is not as if, all the machine guns were left there with all the equipment and, with the magazines intact and told that, okay, here we are going, when we go, you can shoot at us. No, it's not like that.
Absolutely. Well, a quick follow-on question, Brigadier Kuldeep. The point that Tulsi Gabbard made, and Ambassador Goel mentioned that as well, the fact that they're fighting shy of admitting that it is actually, they are in a geopolitical contest with the People's Republic of China. The US is today facing a near-peer adversary of the kind the Soviet Union never was during the Cold War. Do you believe that all these moves that we are seeing now, of course, we saw what happened with Russia in Ukraine, where Trump is trying to, bring the Russians over to the American side. What we're seeing now in Afghanistan as well, these are all moves that are part of the moves to contain China. Do you believe that's the case, really?
Yes, that's definitely the case. That's definitely the case. But you see, we tend to forget that China has got long-term policies.
Right.
Let me just tell you a few things. I mean, I'll take the liberty of just taking a little bit of time. After China in 2011, they invested in the Amu Darya oil basin. Before that, they had invested in INED.
Right.
In 2011, they requested Tajikistan to cede about 1,000 square kilometers of land in the Pamir Mountains, just north of Wakhan.
Yes.
And from 2016 onwards, they began maintaining a small military presence over there on the grounds that they wanted to ensure that Uyghur militants, that the ETIM was not able to, infiltrate over there. Now, after the drawdown of the two US troop surges in 2014-2015, China established contact with the Taliban. Now, among the proposals at that time were developing a transit route to the Wakhan corridor, which would be used for sending crude oil from the Amu Darya energy field to China, and the construction of all-weather metal road up to Wakjir Pass on the Wakhan-Xinjiang corridor was started and ended. And after that, they established a small post over there. But they did not enter or were not able to enter on account of the fact that the US NATO continued to be present in Afghanistan, and account that the ETIM may be encouraged to move into using the infrastructure that they develop or attack that infrastructure.
Right.
Now, in October 23, Afghan and Chinese leaders again met on the sidelines of the third Trans-Himalaya, Forum for International Cooperation, and discussed the opening of the, Wakhan corridor. In July 24, the Taliban captured a Pakistani border post astride the Wakhan.
Right.
And is now in their
Absolutely. Brigadier Kuldeep, I'm sorry we have to interrupt. You're completely out of time, but thank you very much for setting that stage of what we are seeing today is actually a culmination of the last couple of years of work between China and the Taliban. And of course, we know that it is really the geopolitical contest between the United States and China, and Afghanistan is the new battleground for that. That's a story we'll keep following very closely. Thank you very much for joining us, Ambassador Goel and Brigadier Kuldeep Singh.